This is the Jack Wolf Knives Gunslinger Jack, and it is a great choice if you like your knives to actually cut. Now, the Gunslinger Jack, this is a $350 knife that is made in China. A lot of you just left the video right there. This is likely made by Riot. Jack Wolf does not disclose their OEM, but there's a lot of little signs in this that suggest that it is probably Riot. Riot also makes a lot of their manufacturers suppress that they're using Riot, so I think this is probably Riot. But Ben Belkin, who is the owner and operator of Jack Wolf Knives, he is American. He does design these in America and then has them made overseas. Jack Wolf Knives made their names with their slip joints, like the sharpshooter jack here, and has more recently started making folding, locking knives like this one. You can see this one is a bolster lock. You've got a bearings knife with a modern lock. And the Gunslinger is, as you can see here, basically a locking version of their first ever design, the sharpshooter jack. And both of these are based on a traditional gun stock pattern on the handle with a clip point blade. Like all of Jack Wolf's locking knives, it's a little bit bigger than the slip joint version that it came from. The Gunslinger here has a 3.23 inch blade, 120 thousandths on the blade stock, so moderate blade stock, not super thin but not super thick either. It's, if you look at some comparisons here, compare it to the Benchmade 940, about the same overall length, a little bit less blade, a little bit more handle. Very similar in overall size to your Para 2, at least similar in length, though it's obviously a much less bulky knife. Compare it to your PM2, and you can see it is significantly smaller than the PM2. And then let's put it next to your Atom and your Neutron. And you can see right there, this is a mid-size knife through and through. Weight-wise, we are talking 2.9 ounces for this, so a little less than an ounce an inch. That's nice and light. It is running on bearings, like all of Jack Wolf's locking knives. Blade steel is S90V. That's another reason that I think this is probably Riot. Jack Wolf started using S90V instead of M390 about the same time that Riot switched over from M390 to S90V. This version here is a bolster lock with this pink camo carbon, which is another one of those sort of resin-infused carbon dioxides. Looks pretty cool, has that nice chatoyance to it. And this is, again, a bolster lock. You can get other versions, as with everything that every release Jack Wolf does. They release multiple variants simultaneously. There were versions with Kieranite covers, Ultim covers, other carbon fiber variants, and then there is always a version like the Bionic Jack that I reviewed. This guy here, there is always also a version that is a full titanium frame lock, which functions identically to this bolster lock. It's just the lock is exposed the whole way through. And again, this is a $350 knife at most retailers. Jack Wolf knives don't sell out like they used to, so you can usually wait a bit. Sometimes you wait for a discount, but it is an expensive knife. So what makes this knife good? The star of the show is this blade. This is a clip point through and through. Big flat, little bit of curve toward the tip, a little bit of belly, and then this great swedge that just comes down to a nice, relatively low point. The shape of this is pretty similar to a drop point, and like most drop points, there's a very versatile, general use blade shape with the added benefit that this swedge gives you a very fine, pointy tip, which is great for getting into stuff, getting around stuff, getting, when you need to make sort of trace cuts on the table, things like that. It's just a very useful blade shape. And it's pretty here. Lots of subtle details, like the way that these edges sort of come a little bit apart from each other. You can see these aren't quite parallel. They go apart just a little bit. All the little design details are just cool. Very nice fuller that we'll talk about in action, works very well. Nice jimping across the back. It's really the execution that makes this blade so good, though. You can see you've got a great plunge there. You've got a perfectly functional sharpening choil. Really nicely knocked down bevels across the top. And you can see I have used this knife quite a bit. But the star of the show is absolutely the hollow grind, as is the case with most Jack Wolf knives. Comes from this 120,000 stock down to an edge that is so thin that it literally feels almost like pinching paper when you pinch that edge there. If you look sort of down that edge, you can see, it's hard to capture on camera, but you can see how much this edge just disappears. This is a 17-degree per side edge, and it's a very thin bevel because this is just a very, very thin knife behind the edge. This blade will bite where other knives will skate across things. It will slice through cardboard way more easily than most of your knives. You get the kind of performance with this edge that honestly you only really get out of chef knives in general. There aren't many folding EDC knives out there that get quite so sharp behind the edge as Jack Wolf knives, especially when you put a very good edge on them. Honestly, and you know, this is a great traditional blade shape, but whatever quibbles you may or may not have about that blade shape, any blade that cuts this well, any blade that is this sharp is going to feel like an excellent performer. And that's been my experience with this knife. This knife is one of the sharpest knives that I own, and it has done every chore that you would need a knife to do extremely well just because it is so darn sharp. In the garden, around the house, whatever I need, it is more than sharp enough to do it because of this really, really good hollow grind. Going back to the handle, you've got a traditional gun stock pattern that's larger than most gun stock patterns. So, you know, that's a traditional pattern, and most of your traditional gun stocks are going to be closer in size to the sharpshooter jack here, where it's a relatively small knife. And you know, with the gun stock, you've got that smaller part, that larger part, and sort of your first couple fingers go into this first part, the fat of your hand goes into this back part, gives you a nice, comfortable, secure grip, especially with these contoured handles that Jack Wolf always has. Well, they took that shape and made it a little bigger, both taller and longer on the sharpshooter, and it works really well. With this gun stock pattern, you've got space for 2 to 3 fingers because you can choke all the way up onto the base of this blade. You can get 2 to 3 fingers up on this grip, and then this back portion is quite fat to roll into your palm, and these scales are fully contoured all the way. And so it just fills the hand very nicely while still being mostly a neutral handle. It's not telling you exactly where your hand has to be. You can grip it, pinch up a bit here, you can choke back a little bit, you can choke even further back if you really want to grip this back part and sort of get a little bit more leverage over the blade. It's a really nice, comfortable, useful handle with lots of subtle design details. Like this line isn't quite flat, it's slightly concave. This one's slightly concave. You can see that slight curve there. There's a slight sort of sine wave kind of curve where it just goes up and then comes back down, then flattens out. There's just lots of little subtle details in the way that this handle is shaped that both make it more aesthetically pleasing and more comfortable. And of course, the fit and finish, as with everything Jack Wolf does, is immaculate. And when I say immaculate, we're literally talking a level that is above most production knives out there. You can see absolutely no gaps between these insets and the blasted titanium here. Anywhere you're seeing that's because this has been relatively, carried for quite a few days so far, and that is going to show your snail trails. Everything is very nice and flush except for where there's intentional bevels, like between the back spacer and the sides of the handle here. Your blade fits very neatly into the handle, both when it's open and then when it's closed. This one is a little bit off center now. I will talk about that in a bit, but everything just fits together very, very nicely, very flush. Jack Wolf knives, whoever their OEM is, I guess probably Riot, it's as good as any production knife you're going to find on the market. So you have a handle that's very nice, very versatile. It's both neutral and comfortable, which is often hard to do. So it does, you feel like you've got control over that blade, whether you're choked back, whether you're choking up. It's light, it's agile, it's easy to grab onto, and it's finished very, very well. Just a fantastic handle overall. Again, blade finishing on the fit and finish is just about perfect. I mean, end to end, this is just a very nicely designed and very nicely executed knife. And then on top of that, it's a great carry because of how much this blade fits into the handle here. It's sort of a bit like your small Sabenza, a little bit bigger than the small Sabenza, but it has that same thing where most of your blade fits in the handle. So when it's hanging in your pocket, it just doesn't take up that much space. I found this very easy to carry. And then you've got a 3.2 inch blade, not a small blade, that is extraordinarily sharp. And that has been really nice. I've really, really enjoyed carrying this knife and just using it for the stuff you use a knife for. It's always been as sharp as I need. It's always been easy to carry, and it's always been right there as a result. The action. So again, this is a frame lock. This is a frame lock on bearings. One of the real signatures of Jack Wolf Knives slip joints was this walk and talk, the clack, clack. Very satisfying, very distinct. Really, one of the reasons that people came to love Jack Wolf Knives was that distinctive slip joint walk and talk. This is not as interesting in action on bearings here. It's fine. It is a perfectly functional, albeit smooth rather than drop shutty bearings action here. It is a smooth controlled drop. On the open, you can either use this front flipper here. I don't like front flippers, but this one works better than most for me. Or your groove here works really well with either a thumb flick like that, that's my preferred method, or reverse flicking. I'm pretty bad at the reverse flick, but even I can get this one to work. There's tons to sort of catch your thumb right there. And it's really effortless and easy to use. It's nice and smooth. The one issue with the, and lock bar release, plenty of space there to get your thumb in. Pretty light lock bar tension, so easy to push over. And then the blade sort of, again, you've got to coax it shut. You can shake it if you really want to, but this is sort of a deliberate open, deliberate close the way it's tuned. I do have one problem. This pivot likes to walk. As you see when I open and close the blade here, of course, now it's not doing it now that I'm up. There, you saw it there. Watch this pivot. Doop. It moves. Sometimes it'll move a ton. Like sometimes this whole time I'm opening and closing the blade, it'll follow the blade the whole way. Sometimes it'll move just a skosh like it did there. This pivot has been frustrating. It just hasn't quite gotten the way that I would like it to be. That pivot is also the reason that this is not quite centered. Most Jack Wolf knives I've had have been perfectly centered. This one is slightly off-centered. So the fit and finish on the bearings, on this bearings action is good, but there's nothing exceptional about this action. And when you switch over to these frame lock Jack Wolf knives, you're getting a slightly larger knife. It's still light, it's still easy to carry. It's definitely safer, and it's arguably more versatile because you do have an actual lock here. And that is, any way you cut it, a safer and more versatile knife than a slip joint. It's a one-handed opener. It's faster to open, faster to close. But you are, instead of having that really satisfying and clicky frame lock action, you are getting a bearing action that is fine. It's neither remarkably good nor remarkably bad. It's not quite at the same level of fit and finish as the rest of the knife. It's not going to be a problem, but don't think that this is like the action is going to be a selling point. You're buying this knife for the blade and for the level of fit and finish, not for that action, at least in the current iterations. Let's see, any other issues that I've got here? No, I don't think so. I think that's sort of my overview of the knife. It's honestly the real calling cards of this. It's super slicey, super light, super easy to carry. And with this clip point shape, very versatile. This gun stock handle, very comfortable, very easy to hold, very easy to use. I sort of see four groups of people that would really, sort of four target audiences for this knife. Four groups of people who will love this knife because it is a $350 knife. It's not cheap. First people, obviously, your Jack Wolf collectors. You probably already have one of these. You know, Jack Wolf Knives does really foster, sort of a collector's spirit with how many different iterations they come out with their different knives. I've got a whole bunch that I'm going to be putting reviews up for soon. And I love that Jack Wolf sort of takes the best parts of knife hype culture, giving us a lot of interesting materials, a lot of different fit and finishes, different blade finishes, different handle finishes, and then lots of different variants on the same designs, all with that high level of execution. So if you're a Jack Wolf collector, Nothing about this will disappoint you, particularly if you already have a sharpshooter and you like that shape. But the second group of people that would really like this is honestly, or I'll get to them third. Second group is people that like traditional patterns but want something that is more modern, that has that modern lock. If you really like gun stock patterns, they are a very nice neutral pattern. They're very comfortable. There's something that a lot of people that have been in the knife community for a while are probably familiar with a gun stock pattern. They're probably familiar with a clip point blade. If you like those things, but you want a modern folding knife, a modern folding locking knife, this is a great option as long as you're in that price point, as long as you can play in that $350 range. You do get those sort of that slim profile in the pocket that you want from a traditional knife. You do get that very slicey blade that you would hope to get in a traditional knife. You do get a light carry, you get a nice neutral handle, you get nice contouring. The sort of stuff that traditional knife makers all do by hand, it's done at a very high production level here. So if you do like gun stock patterns, clip point patterns, sort of traditional knives like that, and you want a locking knife, Jack Wolf's locking knives continue to be an excellent option. And the Gunslinger here, because the clip point and gun stock are both very traditional patterns, it's probably going to be one of your best bets if that's who you are. Third group, who I think are probably the largest group that will love this knife and the one that really should not sell it short, are people that just want an easy to carry, small to mid-size, everyday carry knife that cuts really, really well. I cannot overstate how much the crazy cutting performance you get from this blade improves the knife overall. You know, even though these handle ergonomics, it's not like there's huge scallops or anything. There's nothing that really locks your hand in place, but you don't need to be locked in place when the blade cuts this well. It's whatever you're slicing, it gets right into it. It's easy. You never need to put much pressure on the blade. It's always sharp enough for any task. And then it folds up nice and small. It's easy to carry. It's nicely finished. It's tough. It's robust. The action is good enough. If you just want a really good high-end EDC and you really do value blade performance, you're the sort of person who's like, I love my TRM Neutron, but I wish I had something a little bougier, this is a really, really good choice. This is probably the most generally useful locking blade that Jack Wolf has come out with so far. It's probably his best design. I think it took the transition from the smaller form factor of the slip joint up to the larger one better than a lot of his designs have or will, just because of the way that gun stock pattern feels. It is just going to be a really solid, sharp, slicey, everyday carry. And I think a lot of people will like the knife just for that. And the last thing is the last group, group 4, if you really just appreciate high-end fit and finish. This is very nicely done. Jack Wolf always uses interesting materials. You've got truly like borderline custom level grinds on here. Everything is crisp. Everything is very smooth. Everything is extremely well finished. And you do get some of those less common materials all in that package. It reminds me in a lot of ways of the level of fit and finish I had on a few Trevor Berger custom knives I had a while back. That's the closest thing in my mind to the level that you're getting on here. So if you really like EDCing just a very nicely finished piece and you don't want to go all the way up to that custom level, pay $500, $600, $700 or more for your knife, as long as you're okay buying from China, buying from a Chinese manufactured knife, this is a really solid option for people that just like a bougie EDC. If you don't play in this $350 price range, obviously this is out of the picture. If you don't like Chinese-made knives, this is out of the picture. And everything that Jack Wolf makes, except for their recent EDC fixed blade, which was made by LT Wright, all their stuff is made in China. So if you got either of those issues, this won't be the knife for you. But if you like the design, or even if you just really want a knife you can carry everywhere that is actually going to cut and is going to cut as well or better than everything in your collection, there's a lot to love here. And I think a lot of knife enthusiasts could really benefit from experiencing a truly sharp knife. I think a lot of people have never really experienced what a actually sharp knife feels like, and just how much better every single cutting task becomes when your knife is actually sharp. So those are my thoughts on the Jack Wolf Knives Gunslinger Jack. Stay tuned to this channel for more reviews that respect your time and your pocketbook, and I will see you on the next one.